Remember this backstory involving flags at colleges, and the burning of flags? The backstory started at Hampshire College in Western Massachusetts, which decided to lower their flag to half-mast after Donald Trump won, to be sensitive towards the way many people felt that, in a way, there was a death of sorts as a result of Donald Trump winning. And when that happened, many veterans were very, very upset, because flag code dictates that you only lower a flag to half-mast when someone has actually died, when there is an actual mourning taking place. After that, Donald Trump jumped on Twitter and said, we really need punishment for people who are burning flags, maybe a year in jail, maybe stripping citizenship. Of course, it turns out that burning the flag is constitutionally protected, that stripping citizenship has been banned by the Supreme Court as a punishment for crimes that one might commit. So we've stepped back from that. But the latest news is that there are 54 House Republicans that have co-sponsored Congressman Michael Turner's bill, H.R. 6433, which would strip federal funds from higher education institutions that take down their flag. And the way this is worded is, quote, to render ineligible for federal funds any institution of higher education that removes, censors, takes down, prohibits, or otherwise halts display of a flag of the United States. Now, you might read that and say, that's insane. How on earth would you possibly enforce that? How on earth would that work? Well, let's look at Section 2 of the proposed bill, called Ineligibility for Federal Funds, which says, in general, federal funds may not be made available to an institution of higher education pursuant to an official policy of the institution to prohibit the display of the flag of the United States by the institution, removes, censors, takes down, prohibits, or otherwise halts display of a flag of the United States. The way this is worded, guys, you would think, well, if a college says we are banning flags from our campus, that would sort of be one thing. And by the way, I would argue that institutions of higher learning would not be able to do that. How do you say, no, you're not allowed to wear an American flag hat? You're not allowed to wear an American flag T-shirt or have an American flag on your backpack. That would be insane, and no sane court would uphold that. But what the bill is saying is merely the choice not to have a flag on campus would make it so that funds are stripped. There's no requirement whatsoever that colleges display flags on campus.
Yeah, I think it's really just a piece of red meat legislation so they can go to their constituents and say, I did this big, important thing. Yeah. It's not actually out to solve the ills of the country.
And this is a major waste of taxpayer dollars, Rachel. When you think about, number one, the fact that this would be incredibly difficult to enforce, if even legal. If you think about the reality that there's no requirement to fly a flag on college campuses, it talks about just removing a flag. And I was looking at comments on conservative forums about this, and there were right-wingers saying, good, federally funded institutions shouldn't be allowed to disrespect the country by not flying the flag. Actually, they can. This is the federal government attempting to coerce speech. Not displaying a flag is not the type of speech that the federal government can coerce.
Well, legally, there's nothing sacred about a flag.
No, there isn't. And if you pass a law that tells schools specifically you must display a flag, you're basically saying it's okay for the government to dictate the specifics of how schools can legally express themselves. This is actually a limitation on speech by the government. And when we hear about this idea of the government should be as small as possible from conservatives, unless it is necessary to pass a law, there should not be a law passed. Only make laws when they are absolutely necessary. How can you argue that this is even remotely necessary, Pat? And it actually saddens me when conservatives are okay with big government when they agree with it, usually in the name of patriotism. And otherwise, it's, hey, non-intervention by the government.
Yeah, and then it's such a big infringement on their free speech when they want to fly the Confederate flag in public buildings. It's a complete contradiction.
There is a group on the right that generally understands why this makes no sense, and that is actually libertarians. And I don't often or regularly agree with libertarians, but they're absolutely spot on that this is something that would be incredibly heavy-handed and arguably not even legal. This is sort of like a bill being passed that says you only get federal funds if you use a particular history textbook, or you only get federal funds if the chancellor makes a particular speech on the first day of classes. And the last thing on this is that there are those who say, these schools are federally funded. It's like if the Department of State says they aren't going to fly the American flag. No, not at all. A school is not a federal entity merely because it receives federal funding. And there is absolutely no equivalence whatsoever. This is absolutely shameful. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. And it is, as Pat said, just a red meat dog whistle for so-called patriotic Republicans. I've talked about how people of all ages, but particularly millennials, are owning cars less and participating more in the sharing economy. And one of the more popular options is Zipcar, which gets you a car when you want it, when you need it. They offer all sorts of cars, SUVs, hybrids, whatever you need. It includes insurance and it includes gas. You just pay for the time that you actually use the car. And you can reserve the car online, from your smartphone, over the phone. Then you unlock it with your Zip card. Each car share member reduces their personal CO2 emissions by between 1,100 and 1,600 pounds per year. For our audience, Zipcar is offering $25 of free driving credit if you sign up at joinzipcar.com/David. Support our show, reduce your carbon emissions and your spending on cars. Sign up at joinzipcar.com/David.